こんにちは。aps アカデミーの上村紅巴です。音読こそ英語の基本ということで、この動画を通して音読のお手伝いをさせていただきます。英語を英語の語順のまま理解することを目標に音読を進めていってください。Let's get started. 祖母のキルト。Sally arrived early. As she walked around the old house, she couldn't help feeling sad because of what was about to happen. It was almost a year since her dear grandmother had passed away in the house at the age of 92. The family had very much wanted to keep all her things. Unfortunately, the family business had failed and left them with heavy debts. In the end, the bank had forced the family to have an auction sale to repay their debts. The auction was to be held today. Sally wandered into the yard where all her grandmother's things were neatly arranged, including dishes, old furniture, and the like. She was especially anxious to see the quilt that had been in her family for over 100 years. She found it in a corner of the yard, lying on her grandmother's bed as she always remembered it. Coming close, Sally began to touch gently the patches of cloth which had been sewn together with so much love and care. If this quilt could talk, she thought, the stories it would surely tell. Her entire family history was contained within its borders. For instance, there was the patch of cloth from her great-grandmother's wedding dress. Around the edges of this family treasure, there were, of course, the newer additions. These pieces of cloth were related directly to Sally and her cousins, recording baby births, graduations, weddings, and other happy occasions. Sally was so glad that her grandmother had kept all these pieces. Sally had never attended an auction before. She had heard you had to bid for things you wanted. In other words, people offered money for an item, and the person who offered the most money would get it. Over the previous several weeks, she had managed to save $100 in order to bid on the quilt. Surely this will be enough, she had thought. Now the big moment had arrived. Looking around, Sally was surprised to see how many people had turned up, some from far away. As the auction began, Sally waited. Finally, the time came to bid on the quilt. She held her purse tightly and listened. The first bid was $50. She was shocked. It was so high. Quickly, other people bid, and soon the bidding reached $85. It was now or never. Taking a deep breath, Sally yelled out, $100. For a moment, there was silence. Hope filled her. She glanced again at the quilt, thinking how pleased her grandmother would have been with her at this moment. Just then, from the back, another person shouted, $125. In an instant, Sally's eyes filled with tears. That was it. She had lost her chance. Suddenly, feeling very miserable, she couldn't help wondering why so many people would be interested in that old, torn, dirty quilt. The quilt finally sold for $500 to a complete stranger. For the rest of the auction, with an empty feeling inside her, Sally just stayed around to bid for a few small items that reminded her of her childhood. After the sale, she went to the counter to pay for the few items that were now hers. The woman at the cash register handed her a rather large box. When Sally opened it, there was the quilt. There must be some mistake. Someone else got this, she said. At that moment, she noticed a handwritten note attached to the quilt with a safety pin, which read, Dear Madam, before the auction, I noticed you admired the quilt. Clearly, this object was very precious to you. Your sadness at losing the bid was so apparent that it broke my heart. Although you didn't know me, please accept this quilt as my gift. I don't expect repayment from you. I only ask that you do a similar favor in the future for a stranger who happens to come to cross your path. Yours, a sentimental stranger. どうだったでしょうか？以上、aps アカデミー上村弁当の音読動画でした。See you next time!